Court is now in session. This case, Volkswagen Automotive versus the EPA on the topic of Volkswagen falsifying their emission tests. Prosecution, please present your opinion statements.
As we have seen through many tests, Volkswagen Automotive installed devices in their cars to falsify their emissions tests. These devices could sense whether the car was under testing conditions in a lab versus when the car was driving under normal conditions, and then adjust the emissions accordingly. Therefore, when this car was driving outside, it was releasing toxic and harmful chemicals into the atmosphere far above the approved emissions rate. As a representative of the EPA, it is my job to enforce the Clean Air Act and ensure all citizens have clean, fresh air to breathe. And VW directly breached that right.
Thank you, attorney. Now, defendant, present your opening
Thank you,
statement.
Your Honor. As CEO of Volkswagen, I hold the interests of all the stakeholders paramount, and therefore would never attempt to do something like this on purpose. This was obviously the doing of a handful of software engineers, and I don't believe that we as a company should be on trial, but the engineers themselves.
Okay, I now allow the prosecution to call their first witness to the stand.
I would like to call Ace Ventura, EPA lab tech to the stand. Hello, Ace.
Hello.
Now, Ace, you tested the Volkswagen automobiles under both testing and non-testing conditions, correct?
That is correct, sir.
And did these tests perform the same under both conditions?
Not exactly. See, when they were tested in standard lab conditions, they emitted the right amount of NOx values, but when they were tested in the real world, they were emitting about 40 times as much NOx into the atmosphere, which is not good.
So what you're saying is that these cars were not only were only emitting the proper emissions when they were under lab conditions, but when they were on the road, they were emitting dangerously high levels of chemicals into the environment?
That's correct, sir. When consumers were driving these cars, they were emitting dangerous levels of NOx.
Wow. Can you explain what gases like NOx do to the atmosphere?
Well, they don't harm the atmosphere like a greenhouse gas does to say, but they can have severe effects on human health, especially the respiratory system. It can cause a handful of complications like bronchitis, lung disease, and even death. It also reacts with the emissions from tailpipes to cause photochemical smog, which is a big cause of asthma, and it just doesn't look pretty over the city.
Wow. Thank you, Ace.
Thank
I have
you,
no
sir.
further questions,
Thank you.
Your Honor.
I will now allow the defense to cross-examine the witness.
That won't be necessary, Your Honor.
Prosecution, I will now allow you to call your second witness to the stand.
I would now like to call Jeff Smith, Volkswagen software engineer, to the stand. Hi, Jeff. So, Jeff, you're one of the software engineers who is being blamed with installing the defeat devices on these cars. Your CEO actually blames individual engineers like you for the task. So was it your responsibility and your decision?
Not at all. Our CEO approached us and told us we had to create this device to falsify their emissions tests to pass them, and he threatened us. Our jobs were on the line, so we just had to do it.
Can you explain further?
Well, VW wasn't passing their emissions test on a certain line of cars they were trying to get out, so the CEO approached my team and I to create these devices that would pretty much know when the car was being tested under lab conditions, and it would output a correct amount of NOx to pass emissions tests. But when the cars were being driven on the road, they were emitting dangerously high levels of it. And I know it's my job as an engineer to do what's ethically beneficial to the public, but you gotta understand, my job was on the line.
It's okay, Jeff. VW is on trial, not you.
Thank you.
As you can see, ladies and gentlemen, it is obvious that VW used their lower employees to try and fix a problem that they could not solve in time. And this fix is now causing detrimental effects to people's health. No further questions, Your Honor.
I will now allow the defense to cross-examine the witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. I do have a question for Mr. Smith. Sir, you touched on it earlier, but do you know your ethical responsibility as an engineer?
Yes, I do.
Well, evidently not. As one of the fundamental canons of your practice is that engineers shall hold paramount the safety, health, and welfare of the public, and another is that engineers shall avoid deceptive acts. Do you agree that you violated both of those fundamental canons?
Yes, sir, but
Then is it not your job to follow those canons and advise your CEO on a better solution that holds true to them? Did you hold true to that responsibility?
no, sir.
Then, ladies and gentlemen, looks like my client is not at fault. Not at all. That's it.
Thank you all. After hearing all the arguments, I find the CEO guilty on all charges of emissions falsifying. You not only went against the law set out to protect the health of citizens, but you also blamed your employees when they were only going along with what you threatened to do. I sentence you to 10 years in federal prison.